An interview with Coach Matthias Jones. Following will be simulcast with WOFI, Prince William, New Hampshire. Here is Hamilton Enterprise owner Tom McGill. I was able to sit down with Hamilton coach Matthias Jones for his basketball game against Matt Connor and his team. Coach Jones, thank you for meeting with me today. My pleasure, Tom. I think everyone knows your story, how you were recruited by Coco Stefani on behest of Hamilton Fletcher to be the coach of 3 sports here at the college. Well, that's true. Coco flew out to Indiana after my high school won the national championship. I was skeptical at first, but with a little encouragement, Hamilton Fletcher. I was persuaded, yes, by Hamilton to fly back with Coco to New Hampshire to check out the job. Coaching college, well, I had to consider it. What was the defining moment that made up your mind? I think we both know the answer to that, and I can give you a clue. It happened at Fletcher Hill. Okay, back to Indiana. Your dad passed away, and you didn't know it was more than just passing away until Coco, owner of Club Max in Prince William, showed up in Indiana. Yeah, that's true. My dad was very close to my Aunt May and myself. I think I was off my game about certain clues when Dad was found dead in his pickup. Your Aunt May is your father's sister. Correct. Her husband, as my mother, died when I was just a kid. Coco joined forces with me and we found out what Dad was up to and we tracked down his killers. So, you get back to Hamilton, into a colonial on the Common. No, I stayed at a local inn till arrangements were made to move into the colonial. Well, here's where Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde come into play. You investigated the Prince William slasher. How did that happen, and what gave you the legal power to do that? Well, first of all, I'm not an investigator. I learned a lot from growing up in the middle of Dad's investigations, and the FBI were grateful not just that Dad's murder was solved, but that we thwarted the huge conspiracy around it. There are papers on file giving me some special status, but I'm not an investigator. I have my father's intuitive sense of the landscape. I call it my side road theory. Did they give Coco that same legal status? That did not happen. That's when you met the new security cop for the college, Bucky Driscoll. Oh, well, where do I start? At the beginning. Let's just say Bucky was wearing his Bermuda shorts. He was a little chunky, and I remember him adjusting his glasses and blowing a brass whistle, annoying everyone. He never got off on the right foot with Coco when he told Coco to move his butt. I'm not sure, but I think that's when Coco started calling him Rodent. You were right there when Dr. Povich from the college died in the observatory. So was Bucky. He locked us out of the roadway. Povich's death was complicated and involved my parish priest, Father Jim Gallagher. But I was trying to coach an away game in Maine, and then there was a second murder. Any other investigations involving professors at the college? Before Woozy Williams, who I knew in Indiana, was hired, Hamilton Fletcher brought in a hotshot from Florida. At the time that Professor Brad Davis, a real bad boy, was knee-deep with the Boston Mafia and the Fiore family. You're off and out of Hamilton on investigations in Prince William and Boston itself. Coco has friends in Boston. Friends? Yeah, friends. And Prince William is just over the Devonshire Hills. 15 minutes as long as Corky Corrigan isn't on patrol at the crest of the Devonshires, the Notch. So I'm in Prince William quite a bit. St. Bart's is in Prince William. Parts of PW are rough. I once chased a murderer in the fog in the rafters of the Crosstown Bridge. Too bad Oliver Wombat couldn't have broadcasted on WOFI. Wombat is a lunatic. On another note, you ended up in a very dangerous part of New York City. We were trying to find out what happened to Coco's brother Anthony. Thank God we had Uncle Dulio with us. What does he do? You know, I really don't know what he does. He's loyal as hell to Coco and me. There's always one question that's gnawed at me ever since I bought the Enterprise from Jerry St. Clair. If I ever committed homicide, it would be on Jerry St. Clair. The man is a walking annoyance. No, it's not Jerry, it's Lark Larson. Why did Hamilton Fletcher allow Lark to coach at the college year after year and have such an abysmal record? The town loves Lark, it's that simple. His girlfriend Flo Nightingale is an airhead, but they filled the stadium for Lark. I think when Hamilton was convinced by Coco he could make more money with a winning record, things changed. Coach, let me go off the record with a rundown of lists of names in rapid succession. I'd like your quick take on these locals and the others. Sure. Arnie Dewars, reckless. Bucky Driscoll, not too swift. George Strickland, strong, steady, and steadfast. Well, that's good. Wendell Harris, goof. Leo Crowley, your old team manager. Reliable, poor Leo. Webster Howard and Clyde Hooper. Oh, Hooper. He thought he was a British agent, and so did everyone else. Webster was a nice guy. You didn't mention one of the pastors at First Parish, Bricker. No good? No good. Has the town of Hamilton always been a little strange? Years ago? I didn't realize that until I investigated what I thought was a disappearance 25 years in the past. Froggy Finley was just as dense as he is today, and Arnie Dewars was born obnoxious. Lark was a little wilder in the past, and he did like the women. Your old boss, Jerry St. Clair, actually didn't get carried away with his newspaper reporting back then. Lark had some notable players. Notable? Snooky McKenzie is the one that stands out. He makes a reappearance in town every now and then. And Brownie Plimpton, the most spastic man I ever met, he runs a beach shop on Shore Drive. Lark had a nickname for everyone on his team back then. Fortunately, I forgot all of them. Lark thought they were NFL caliber. I'm looking through my notes. Who is this guy Daniels who helped with an investigation? You got it wrong, Tommy. Daniels was a Sherlock Holmes buff who kept butting his head into the case of a hooker who was murdered 2 floors above Daniels' apartment. You like Club Max. Coco's father originally put up the money for Club Max. I like Coco and I like his family. Father Gallagher keeps telling me I get into trouble by hanging out at Club Max. And he's right. Coco's like a brother to me. Bruno, he's the bartender, he's a good guy. And the girls? And the girls. Franny, if you're listening to this, you are my girl. Before I wrap things up, Herbert Lane hates your guts. Herbert cheats his way back into office every 4 years. Herbert gets upset because I figure things out before he does. And Mayor Picardo doesn't nail him on the cheating? Why should he? He cheats worse than Herbert Lane. And they've got Don Pacheco pinned in politically. He does his job as police chief in Prince William and forgets about the cheating in Kip Bosco. Bosco is in Vice? Yeah, there's the wolf watching the hen house. Winky can take care of Bosco and anyone Coco doesn't like. Gives them the treatment. That's as far as I'll go on that. Who's your favorite opposing coach? Matt Connor, St. Pat's. We fished together. He's a good friend. Those organized crime families, isn't that kind of scary crossing their paths? Albert Fiore always liked me. He called me Matt. Charlie DePiro and I are on very good terms. Last question. Did you anticipate Hamilton Fletcher had enemies enough to murder him? No doubt he did have enemies, Tom. Ham Fletcher was upset enough to leave town when he saw what Hamilton left him. I just didn't expect to see Hamilton murdered by someone I knew. Thank you, Coach. Thanks, Tom. Have a good day. Anthony was my bro. Hey, I'm Coco Stefani. Anthony was my bro. He was missing for 5 years. Anthony had drug problems. He got in with the wrong crowd. When you do that, it's like walking the tightrope at the circus. It's a long way down. Anthony had been handling drugs from New York City. Anthony never came back. I was down there. What's one guy gonna do? Those boys from down there will eat you alive. I didn't like it, but I drove the vet back to Prince William and spent weeks in my club just staring at my beer. When I didn't finish a mug, Bruno would bring me a fresh one. It took me a while, but I learned to accept that Anthony ain't coming back. Funny, my mother accepted it right away. I guess living with my old man, she learned to accept things easier than me. My father left my mother when Anthony and me were just kids. My father was an important guy in the Boston, New Hampshire area. Something happened and he left. We grew up on the streets along the docks. Made us tough. Made us strong. Anthony had just gotten engaged before he disappeared. That's the way it goes. Things change. And then Jonesy comes on the scene. I keep telling him the girls at the club think he's hot, but I guess he's got a steady girl, Franny McShane from Hamilton. At least Jonesy deep six that pushy chick, Stefani from Indiana. My mother likes Jonesy. We had him over my mother's house for dinner. You know, pasta, sausage, the works. My mother cooks enough to fill your gut, providing Uncle Dulio doesn't become the human vacuum cleaner. Somehow Lou Marlowe's name came up at dinner. Lou Marlowe was Hamilton Fletcher's mortal enemy. The old man always said that Marlowe caused Dorothy Fletcher's fatal accident up in New York. Sean Grogan, Marlowe's hatchet man, made Marlowe look like an altar boy. The old man thought Lou Marlowe was going to ruin his 70th birthday at Fletcher Hill. The next day, Jonesy and me went over to check some things at the club, and we find out that Rodent Driscoll is in there with the dimwit doers on my music system singing happy birthday. I fired Jonesy's starting pistol and drove the two morons out of the club. That's when Jonesy saw the picture of Anthony and me from the newspaper, just before he went to New York. Fury sent people down from Boston but ran into the deadly gangs in New York. The old man's birthday party, disaster began when Driscoll grabbed the mic. The doers almost got electrocuted in the pool. That's when the plane flew over Fletcher Hill. Lou Marlowe jumped out, but his chute didn't open. Began thinking the old man hired somebody to screw with that chute. But it also led to Jonesy investigating what he said was a murder. I tell you, Jonesy became like a brother to me, arriving at Hamilton College a couple years after Anthony disappeared. Sometimes I had to catch myself from calling him bro. Then I gave up. Jonesy gets it. I took off to New York City on a lead about Anthony's disappearance. That's when all hell broke loose. Jonesy is loyal as hell. Yeah, Jonesy came down to New York, and so did Uncle Dulio. Dulio played ball at Notre Dame and later joined an elite Black Ops unit in the service. Nobody messes with Dulio. Gunfire was brutal in New York. The FBI on our tail, we found the guy who killed my brother. Jonesy and me, we came back to New Hampshire like brothers in Anthony's memory. I tell you, what I tell Jonesy all the time. Drop by the club. The girls are friendly. Coco. The reality of humanity's sublime. In the not-too-distant future. There once was a land with two futures. There once was a land of reality and a land of sublime. Not of creatures, but of beating hearts and laughter. There once was a land of pixels, mixed with stories of the before time. There once was a land where Homo sapiens roamed free, without distortion, without lies. What the hell am I talking about? In a course on political thought, we studied Plato. Sure, he didn't believe in using the senses to understand what is real. Our senses are imperfect. Easy for him to say. Plato is urging us to use our reason in the experience of our lives. We don't want to languish in what he called the cave. Wait a minute, says Aristotle, what about potentiality? Objects are the potential essence of the qualities that come into being. Is that all there is? Asks the popular song. Yes, and things are determined for a purpose. We are to keep a stiff upper lip, so they say. When I wrote The Village, I didn't pull the political thought book off the shelf. Elements of the Plato versus Aristotle debate do evidence themselves in The Village. Inspector Rawlings, on an investigation into the sector once known as Colorado, can't wait to turn off his imager, a manufactured reality. The inspector is rounding up illegal outsiders who have broken into the massive village's enclosed area. One could receive full village status by applying through an application process. Rawlings was undecided whether he would live on the outside during his retirement or remain in the village and have an image-based reality for the rest of his days. Cicero, 106 BC through 43 BC, believed in the Roman Republic during his career. He disputed an unwritten alliance called the First Triumvirate because it diluted the idea of a republic as well as Senate predominance. The Roman Republic was a representative democracy between 509 BC and 27 BC. Isn't Rawlings' option for retirement the distinction between freedom of what is best for its residents? The guardians of the highest and ruling class are the three classes of Plato's ideal city. The classes are producers, auxiliaries, and guardian. You train in all aspects of learning to become a guardian. Rip the people out of the cave so they can understand what these elites tell them is true, and they'll become more valued and pertinent human beings. The village has drogues controlling human beings. Oh dear. Alexa, was Plato an Ivy Leaguer?
I don't know that.
Hey, Plato, meet James Madison. Madison said, "The people are the only legitimate fountain of power, and it is from them that the constitutional charter under which the several branches of government hold their power is derived." Frank and Mark Embers and their family live on the outside. There is no simulated reality. There is no elite class instructing outsiders on what's best for them. Yet their family is split. Neil Embers lives on the inside, although insiders can experience the outside in the first level exposure rooms and in the departure area. That's it. The Embers' father, Walter, is voluntarily preparing for his ending, which for the villagers is not an ending at all. Walter will exist within an AI world to interact with friends and family members, only it won't be Walter. It will be a simulation of Walter. It's all taken care of in the village. A historical materialism, Marx, if you will. There's no exploited profits, no proletariat in the village. It's all taken care of. So why wouldn't you take this paradise on earth in the village? That's the crux of it. Responsibility. Villages have no responsibility, only self-indulgence. Frank Embers. Once we quit the basis of sensation, all is in the wind. To talk of the immaterial existences is to talk of nothings. To say that the human soul, angels, God are immaterial is to say that they are nothings, or that there is no God, no angels, no soul. I cannot reason otherwise, but I believe that I am supported in my creed of materialism by Locke, Tracy, and Stewart. Letter to John Adams from Monticello, 15th August 1820. Thomas Jefferson. The only way to secure liberty is to place it in the people's hands, that is, to give them the power at all times to defend it in the legislature and in the courts of justice. John Adams. I've been talking about the freedom and attributes of different societies. But what about this idea of so simulating reality that life itself is obscured, and death? You don't die, you're just simulated. And all these people in the picture above, humans in the auditorium, and they're not only not talking with each other, but they don't even know who's next to them in the room. I'm not saying it's not cool to hook up to this viewer. In the village, simulation is taken to the extreme. I will leave it to the reader's imagination to transpose what's being viewed. Finally, no one could believe that life on the outside is easy. One isn't protected or controlled, and there is personal responsibility. But the end result is freedom, and confronting all the pitfalls that freedom brings. Independence is my happiness, and I view the things as they are without regard to place or person. My country is the world. My religion is to do good. Tom Paine, The Rights of Man. Alexa, give me liberty or give me death.
Patrick Henry is credited with saying "Give me liberty" or "Give me death" during a speech he gave at the Second Virginia Convention on March 23, 1775.
reason a sucker is because he doesn't think he's a sucker. He may think just the opposite. The sucker has a need for something he desires at an intense level. There's one born every minute, according to showman P.T. Barnum, believing what you want to believe. Gordon Butts thinks he's cool. Gordon Butts thinks he's bright. Gordon Butts thinks he's the best salesman ever and the world's most dynamic lover. Does the word mediocre sound familiar? If Gordon Butts is none of the above, he can more than likely be maneuvered if he meets the right or wrong person. And there must be something in it for the manipulator, and in the end, the sucker is just a sucker. In Maureen Garrity's mind, Gordon Butts, who has beat the rap on 2 murders, should not be sending a video file to her office. As the investigator on Butts' first homicide, and someone following the details of Butts' second homicide, Garrity is stunned that Butts has surfaced. Where did it all begin, Gordon Butts? More than likely when you entered Walter Thornton's office. Your friend Tom Cowles heard about the Thornton job. Thornton owned a plumbing supply company and you were ready for a change. You wanted to make more money. You crafted your story for Walter Thornton, and I quote, "You don't get sent to jail for lying on a job interview." You said you took Walter Thornton all the way in just a half an hour. Here's the deal. Guys like Butts miss the important components of the con because 1. Butts is full of himself and his abilities. 2. Butts thinks he's smarter and craftier than anyone else. 3. Butts is needy in the sense that he needs money and recognition. 4. His ego demands pampering. Believing what you want to believe. Says Walter Thornton, "I want you to work for me. You're the type of man I could use in my organization." Butts doesn't question why he got the job so quickly. Rather, he pats himself on the back as he plays hard to get and dreams of living at Tanglewood, where Walter Thornton lives. Butts has already checked out at Tanglewood. "I wanted to break out of that dump where I've been living." Butts has also checked out Walter Thornton's young wife when he was at Tanglewood, as she lingered by the pool without her top. Add lust to Butts' vulnerabilities. Butts knows what to say and when to say it with a straight face. He senses other people's weaknesses. He's a bully, a liar, and a bullshitter. And Gordon Butts runs a mini-con on Walter Thornton, putting himself on a pedestal. He could convince everyone he knew everything about anything, believing what you want to believe. "Will you walk into my parlor?" said the spider to the fly. "'Tis the prettiest little parlor that you ever may spy. The way into my parlor is up the winding stair, and I have many curious things to show you when you're there." "Oh no," said the little fly. "To ask me is in vain. For who goes up your winding stair can ne'er come down again." From The Spider and the Fly by Mary Howitt. By the time Butts leaves a dingy bar in southern New Jersey, he has become the victim in an elaborate plot. 3 people by this time and a 4th by accident are already a part of that plot. And he's added another vulnerability that he may have had all along. Gordon Butts loves power, wielding it and abusing it, believing what you want to believe. A long time after I wrote Framed, I posited the question that bothered me. Didn't Butts just once sense that there was more going on than just the billboard displaying his massive ego? It could be argued that he had band-aids pulled over any doubts, or maybe he was just plain stupid. RPF. Beach House by R.P. Fitton. The beauty of the Chesapeake Bay, bordered by the Atlantic Ocean and the eastern shore of Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware, is unmatched for vacationers. The Chesapeake is a haven for summer residents from the inland areas. To summer on the Chesapeake is to find old friends, swim, boat, and fish in the sparkling blue water expanse. Mary Ellen has brought her children to enjoy their time off from school while her husband Tony balances work with the summer fun. Mary Ellen brings her children on the boat to Sabins Island. Through the binoculars, she is stunned to see the orange Mustang in her beach house driveway. Her husband Tony is alone painting the house, and the car belongs to a 23-year-old provocative woman, Sue Lee. Kel, a retired police officer, is a trusted friend and listens to Mary Ellen's concerns about Sue Lee. Mary Ellen can clearly see the Mustang at the beach house. I saw this Alfred Hitchcock production long before I wrote the Beach House book. Forecasts low clouds and coastal fog. Inga Stevens plays a newlywed left alone in a fog-bound beach house by her older husband who's away on a business trip in San Francisco. This beach guy's hanging around, and a screenwriter, all who provide human contact, but she's basically alone. A Hispanic man, Sanchez, comes to the beach house asking for help. Inger Stevens, Karen, leaves him on his own, leading to unforeseen and deadly circumstances. Tony isn't answering the phone despite Mary Ellen's voicemails, and with Mary Ellen on the island with Kel and the kids, Tony is leaving for Seattle in 2 hours. Back at the house, Mary Ellen walks Eloise and stares at the paint-splattered ladder. She asks him, "So, Tony, how was your afternoon?" Then she confronts Tony about Sue Lee, and he doesn't reply. Later, Tony claims that Sue Lee was returning software that he lent to her in the bar where she works. Kel alludes to the violent deaths of 2 men in the area. One man fell off a jetty, and the other had a Corvette tumble off a ramp and kill him. Sue Lee was seen with the other man in Willoughby's Tavern the night before he died. "Something isn't right with that woman," says Kel. "I would cast an older James Garner as Kel." Mary Ellen thinks that she smells the perfume Night Sin inside the beach house. Then the slider glass breaks and someone crushes the outside gravel. Red taillights disappear up the road. Eloise is missing. The palm oil scent of Night Sin is prevalent in the outside shower. Later, she thinks she sees Sue Lee in the grocery store, but it's another woman. At home, there are signs that someone has been inside the house. Did Sue Lee have the keys to the beach house? How about Night Call from the Twilight Zone, written by the great Richard Matheson, who wrote Bid Time Return, which became Somewhere in Time? Eva Keane is an infirmed elderly woman getting phone calls from a moaning caller. The moan morphs into, "Where are you?" and "I want to talk to you." The caller is an elusive acquaintance named Brian, whose residence is a few feet below ground in the local graveyard. Point being, trapped alone and helpless for whatever circumstance is terrifying. Perhaps this episode should be called Sorry, Wrong Number. Kel confronts the sexy Sue Lee at the bar, Barnacle Bill's, and is not immune from her charms. But as he leaves, he spots a dealer's logo on the Mustang, Cross Brothers Motors. Kel continues his investigation, hoping to score the big one. Mary Ellen spots numerous footprints in the sand. Was Sue Lee responsible for the deaths of 2 local married men? Perhaps Sue Lee had run up from the beach and scaled the second-floor window of the beach house. And then comes a frightening message.
Never cared about the night scene. You wanted me to get out unfazed. You should have left me alone. Should have left me alone. And now you're dead. 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 You never cared about the night scene. You wanted me to get out unfazed. You should have left me alone. Should have left me alone. And now you're dead. Now you're dead. Now you're dead. Now you're dead. Now you're dead.
She attempts to confront Sue Lee at the bar, but Sue Lee has taken a few days off. She drives up to Northgate Condos, Unit 42B, Sue Lee's condo. No one is there. Kel makes some calls. One of the widows, a Mrs. Trombley, said Trombley met Sue Lee at a bar, and Mrs. Trombley caught Sue Lee on the beach fooling around with her husband. And Trombley was a perfectionist and would have checked those ramps that caused the car to fall on him. Also, the other man who died was verified as spending time with Sue Lee in the Poconos. Mary Ellen freaks out when the neighbor back home calls and tells her an orange Mustang was in her driveway for 15 minutes. Cal is denied by the local police chief when he asks that the deaths of the two men to be labeled as murders. Tony returns to Binghamton Beach. He'll be spending the next 2 weeks at the beach with Mary Ellen and the family, which he does right away. A phone call from Sue Lee to Tony upsets the reconciliation with Mary Ellen. She confronts Sue Lee at the beach. "He's mine," said Sue Lee. The next day, Tony is dead, having fallen from the ladder while painting the house. And this is where things get interesting as Kel tries to prove the crime, and Sue Lee has not yet gotten her revenge. RPF.
Never cared about the night scene. You wanted me to get out unfazed. You should have left me alone. Should have left me alone. And now you're dead. Now you're dead. Now you're dead. Now you're dead. Now you're dead.
Gerstein's funeral home is waiting for you. Players in Purgatory takes place across the bridge on the road to nowhere. When I was trying to make sense of the world, when I was 3 or 4 years old, I wondered if the people I met outside my own family and neighborhood were the same people with morphed faces. One day I realized, I guess that's not true. That wasn't going to stop me years later from writing a creepy story with that same scenario of a small group of people who are in reality morphed versions of other people. Just a group of players in purgatory. These people are trying to force others into the Gerstein's funeral home where they would become part of the living dead. That is one hell of a creepy thought. From 1968, there was the movie The Night of the Living Dead. I didn't use The Night of the Living Dead as a template. What happened to me was real. After my cousin's death, I had to pick up some paperwork at the funeral home. I drove into the lot and thought I would simply walk in. This place had always given me the creeps because members of my family and relatives had passed through on the way out. I rang the bell. It was loud enough to wake the dead. The front door was locked. Why would it be open if nobody was there? Oh, were they? I remembered what the funeral director had told me. I could always enter through the side door, walk into the parlor, and pick up the paperwork he had left on the hall table. This sounded simple enough, but as I opened the door, I thought of the great horror actor Vincent Price, who might have said, "I've got your paperwork," followed by a maniacal laugh. Mr. Price was not available. I, Robert P. Fitton, had stepped into the embalming room. Oh my God. I didn't want to be in that room where everyone had been prepared for the crypt. I was also a Dark Shadows fan, and thoughts of Barnabas Collins' shenanigans crept down my back like a cold scoop of ice cream in a cold freezer. And the equipment was right there, hanging from the walls on the corpses' tables. I walked slowly as to not awaken the spirits. That wouldn't work because the spirits must have known I was already in there. Step by step, I left the embalming area, knowing I would have to return, or perhaps I could slip out the front door from the inside. How did I feel? Like Mo, Larry, and Curly in this undated photo. I turned, and there was the folder with the paperwork on the glossy mahogany table. The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahogany, Alabama song by Kurt Weill, should have been playing on the funeral home speakers. Not the Doors version or Audra McDonald, both versions I like, but the original freaky version from 1930 sung by laude. And it's so weird I can't even classify it as creepy. And here it is from 91 years ago for all you aficionados of the Sublime. I shuffled to the hall table and I had the paperwork and began a march to the front door. I don't know how, but the door was locked from the inside also. Now come on, Fitton, this is crazy. Crazy, I turned and passed the table and entered the hall to the embalming room. I suppose I could have started whistling the Alabama song. All those tubes and tools, no way could I be an undertaker, or even an official mourner. I leaped outside as if I were emerging from the silty underwater of a swamp. I thought as if I were Woody Allen and had delusional daydreaming about a scenario where the SUV wouldn't start and I would get pulled back inside the funeral home by unseen forces. I have never been back to that funeral home. The idea for Players in Purgatory floated around in my head for a long time. Finally, I wrote it and recorded the audio. When the pugnacious Ralph Norman approaches the drawbridge manned by the strange gatekeeper, he's about to enter a warped reality. He had never seen this bridge, and the sky becomes darker. Norman crosses the bridge, and the gatekeeper vanishes. He is met by a crazed little man named Smelter, who warns him about the players, 13 of them. They want everyone to become like them. It is from the back room of Gerstein's funeral home that the transformations take place, where they absorb people into their being. Norman's car is now missing. Smelter keeps following him, warning him of a high-pitched sound when they're nearby. Then Smelter steals Norman's 50-yard line football tickets and runs away. Smelter is hit by a car but survives because he doesn't want to go to Gerstein's. Smelter breaks away with the tickets. An odd bus driver and a suspicious cabbie add to the creepy feeling. Norman finds Smelter in the side pew at a church, the parishioners singing "Nearer My God to Thee." When the cabbie shows up, Smelter calls him a player. He says, "I know the 13. They morph their faces. They make you think they're different people." Norman finally sees the Victorian Gerstein's funeral home. The Gerstein undertakers, rigid and pasty, take up positions in the street. Later he's at the football game and Smelter shows up. He says, "They morph their faces, brother. Smelter has been running from the players for 3 weeks. They are a force central to all being." Norman berates Smelter and says it's all inside his head. The players don't exist. Back in the city, Norman stares at the glowing hurricane lamp in the Gerstein's window. Inside, the red floral wallpapers are evident. Smelter was inside, forced to a high-backed chair, and then Norman is pulled into Gerstein's. Smelter's name is on the parlor marquee. Formaldehyde is in the air. He's trapped inside the funeral home as Smelter walks from the embalming room. Norman fights his way into the garage and drives a hearse back into town. Now he is taking Smelter's role and warning others with Smelter's words. RPF. Justice for the American West. I was fortunate to have a college professor for the Civil War and the American West who knew his subject matter and graphically told the story that an antithetical history existed side by side with other history, but radically different in its morality and cruelty. I'm talking about the massive influx of European settlers expanding west across the continent. In this wave of migration were the descendants of those who crossed the open tundra created with the arrival of the Ice Age. The customs, culture, and structure of the Native American tribes was slowly confronted, challenged, and eviscerated. Those who remained were herded into confined reservations and left with the ashes of their civilization. In the same timeline, a great nation arose from grit, sweat, and ability to risk everything for a better life. Buttressing the guarantee of individual rights was the Bill of Rights. Government was established within a framework of freedom. That freedom extended to the economic system. Capitalism, albeit not perfect, provided the highest standard of living and variety of goods to the greatest amount of people in the history of the world. This is not a platitude or propaganda, it's fact. That professor emphasized the struggles of the Old West. the young cowboys existing in that world along with outlaws and gunslingers. The Army battalions implemented the ever-changing policies promulgated by the U.S. government. Each tribe or band shall have the right to possess, occupy, and use the reserve allotted to it, as long as grass shall grow and water run, and the reserve shall be their property, like their horses and cattle. Article 5 of the treaty with the Comanches and other tribes and bands, 12th August 1861. A deceitful mantra. But what happened in the West occurred in far-removed generations, their time, not ours. Feeling guilty to the sins of others makes no sense now. I grew up with TV westerns and movie westerns. Native Americans were Indians. They were hostile. I wonder why. Native American tribes were all different, and the conditions in the Old West were sometimes dirty and dingy with frontier justice in some cases. Gunslingers had heavy guns, not the nicely dressed, quick-drawing boys on TV. Truth and right and wrong and justice were indeed the hallmarks of the West. A man was a man who displayed courage and did not turn yellow. A man's word was worth something. To live in the West meant being self-reliant, a rugged individualist. There were premier shows such as Bonanza and Gunsmoke, and there was always a problem to be overcome. These shows had the element of justice as well as touting right and wrong. The tendency is to watch all the shooting and think it was just about killing people. First, it was a TV show with drama and action. The Second World War had just ended, and the unreal shootouts on TV were mild compared to the real carnage of that war. In Maverick, the clever Brett Maverick showboated his fast talking and his card skills. Johnny Yuma, the lone rebel, had a grudge. Paladin was for hire. The Lone Ranger was the only surviving member of 6 ambushed Texas Rangers. The Lone Ranger had his trusted Indian companion Tonto. He had a code he lived by. In today's haphazard, subjective landscape, the Ranger's code to some seems quaint. I believe that to have a friend, a man must be one. That all men are created equal, and that everyone has within himself the power to make this a better world. That God put the firewood there, but that every man must gather and light it himself. And being prepared physically, mentally, and morally to fight when necessary for what is right. That a man should make the most of what equipment he has. That this government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall live always. That men should live by the rule of what is best for the greatest number. That sooner or later, somewhere, somehow, we must settle with the world and make payment for what we have taken. That all things change but truth, and that truth alone lives on forever. In my Creator, my country, and my fellow man. I asked Clayton Moore to say a few words to my cousin David in Massachusetts, and he did. I said the West was antithetical. I've set the table here with a multifaceted assortment of Western ideals and traits. My book is called When You're Dead, You're Dead. The Nexus series features Mr. Melbourne, who hails from the Nexus House. Melbourne has the ability to bring justice to those who realize it may not exist in today's world. And so we begin with a notorious drug-dealing killer who gets off on a conviction on the usual technicality. Melbourne offers the Assistant District Attorney Jake McBride a chance to make things right. Jake at first thinks he's losing his mind, but when he finally accepts the agreement, he steps into the past, where he is Marshal in Nevada Territory. And thus the story unwinds with the players from the present thrust into the quest for justice in the past. I had some fun creating the images of the Old West, close to what I was thinking in When You're Dead, You're Dead. Jake leaves Melbourne behind and sees the past down the long corridor. Unlike the Oxbow incident, Jake stops the hanging of an innocent man pushed by Rhodey Turner. But who killed Dunbar? And Jake, Coltrane, and Doc Talmadge wonder where the derailed train's passengers have gone. A facsimile picture of the Coltrane dining room and a woman who could be Pam Grayson. Judge Mackenzie and Rheingold arrive at the Coltrane, and Soaring Bird, the Shoshone, is sometimes confined at the federal reservation. The Native American around the campfire would tell Jake stories of the Shoshone. Jake and Soaring Bird head through Soroyo Canyon, following up on a lead about Jose Estrada having stolen the silver. They are trailed by a killer and a severe thunderstorm. Postscript, more TV westerns. RPF. To the next generation of dreamers. Happy Tuesday from Fitton on the Air podcast. Sir Richard Branson stowing away on his vessel, the Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity spacecraft, to the edge of space is what I dreamed of when I was a boy. Before John Glenn orbited the Earth, there were several holds and delays before the actual blastoff on February 20th, 1962. So what, Fitton? Those delays were slightly frustrating for fans of the NASA Mercury program. If you were an 11-year-old kid jammed inside a cardboard replica of Friendship 7, your feet propped up like John Glenn, and your entire body motionless in the confined area, it might get challenging as the blood settled downward toward the brain. And the only thing to look at were the lighted up bulbs across the control panel like the Mercury capsule panels. I actually found a photo of a kid looking out a portal window of that exact Mercury replica. Naturally, I photoshopped that hotshot out of the picture and installed myself, 4th grade photo, into the pseudo Friendship 7, and I sprinkled stars and nebulae from Hubble in the background. There I am, dreaming away. I know my parents had their watchful eyes on my spacecraft that never left the ground. They probably talked about it with their friends as they wondered what their kid was doing inside a cardboard ship in the living room. Glenn had a problem with his heat shield during re-entry, and I staggered out of my capsule, feeling as if my eyes were going to pop out of my head. That was the first and last living room flight for astronaut Fitton. Living to see Branson fulfill his dream of going into space is awe-inspiring. This isn't a new TV series or a well-trained astronaut lifted high above the Earth's curvature bordering dark space. It's truly just the beginning of spaceflight, like a new Western Air Express commercial plane between cities in the early 20th century. Dreaming is important. There was Gene Roddenberry dreaming about Star Trek as wagon train to the stars. I would watch my father, a hard-working guy who rose at 4 a.m. to deliver milk, become comically apoplectic to the antics of the lazy, double-crossing opportunist Dr. Zachary Smith, the aberrant stowaway on Lost in Space. I always liked how Jonathan Harris stirred up trouble on the Jupiter 2 and beyond, but I was also captivated by the fact that Robinsons and Don West were on other planets and traveling occasionally in space. I wish John Robinson had just let West unload on Smith just once. If you're going to dream about something, you best be informed by those who know the subject. At the same time I was laughing at Dr. Smith's antics, I was handed a copy of Science Digest from my grandfather, and I began reading articles about science by Isaac Asimov. It was a mixture of inspiration and knowledge. When I was in college, I was ecstatic when I walked into the campus center at UMass to listen to a lecture by Dr. Asimov. I have a portion of that talk, which I recorded at the time. Today I am scratching my head about how Asimov was out to lunch on these predictions, but the respect is still there along with the inspiration. I began writing when my father was taken ill and eventually succumbed to cancer. I never talked to him about what he did or didn't accomplish in his life. For me, I wanted to make up stories, but the insurmountable challenges of getting stories out there kept those dreams inside my head. It was only in college, when assigned to write a mythology story, I was shocked that I could actually construct a story. The first novel I wrote was a Star Trek novel. I had a lot to learn about the mechanics of writing, but the novel was picked up by an agent and made the rounds in New York City's paperback publishing houses. Rewriting and copyright issues have sent the apex of power to freebie status on my website. I would have been happy writing Star Trek novels all day long. There have been lots of novels written, and a fabulous reboot of the original series Star Trek continues. I decided I wanted my own take on space with my own characters. The effort is called Galactic Command. The Nebula Planet was the first novel, and Reunion the second story. There is no transporter in Galactic Command. The transporter is a great shortcut to a planet. I wanted that tension which results in rough rides with a ship or trying to skirt enemies during a battle. In the distant future, time is measured by a different calendar, with a few of our months remaining. Aliens have never been discovered, and the life forms that exist are genetically linked to humans and now have new qualities. The ship is powered by a dimensional bending coil that squeezes vessels at high velocity through the galaxy. And what of the crew of this ESS Explorer spaceship? I have emphasized the interpersonal relations seen on Star Trek, the original series. That's the glue that holds everything together. One more thing. In Star Trek, there's always a captain who's gone bad, or there's a past to each character. I like that. It provides depth. That scenario runs throughout Galactic Command. Example, Commander Jack Bragg. Branson is offering 2 free tickets to travel into space. Just donate to Space for Humanity. Let's take a video snoop at Branson and the crew in 0G. This is Fitton from Photoshop 7. Good day.